Welcome back. It feels like every day there's a new breakthrough in psychedelics.
It really does.
But today's deep dive, it reminds us that even with cutting-edge science, you can't forget the basics of consumer protection.
Right.
We're talking about label accuracy
Uh-huh.
for psilocybin products,
Yeah.
which is a lot more complex than it sounds.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's like we're seeing history repeat itself. Think back to the early days of the cannabis industry.
Well, yeah,
When products started hitting the shelves, it was a real challenge to figure out what was actually in them
for sure.
and at what potency.
Definitely.
And it seems like we're on a similar path now with psilocybin.
You're right. I remember all those stories about cannabis edibles
Oh, yeah?
where THC levels were just all over the place.
Wildly different.
Not exactly what you want, especially when you're looking for a very specific experience
Exactly.
or a certain therapeutic outcome.
Exactly. And with psilocybin, the stakes are even higher, right?
Right.
Like we're talking about a substance that can really profoundly alter your consciousness.
Yeah,
So accurate dosing is absolutely paramount.
that's gotta be.
We need to be sure that what's on the label is actually what's in the product,
For sure.
especially as we move towards making it more accessible.
Yeah, so where does the challenge lie?
Hmm.
Is it just about having the right technology to analyze these products?
Well, that's definitely part of it. Basic potency testing can give you like the overall alkaloid content,
Okay,
but it doesn't give you the full picture.
right.
What we really need to know are the specific levels of psilocybin and psilocin,
Got it.
which are the primary psychoactive compounds in magic mushrooms.
Okay, so it's not just about how much stuff is in there.
Right.
It's the specific types of compounds
Yeah,
and their proportions to each other.
precisely. And that's where techniques like LCMS come in.
Okay,
Liquid chromatography mass spectrometry.
right.
It lets us identify and quantify those individual compounds with incredible accuracy.
So it's kind of like having a molecular fingerprint of the product.
That's a great analogy. Just like a fingerprint can be used to identify a person, LCMS can tell us exactly what's in a psilocybin product
I like that.
and in what amounts.
That makes sense. But why is that level of precision so important?
Well, think about it this way.
All right.
Let's say you have two products.
Okay.
Both of them are labeled as containing 1 gram of psilocybin mushrooms.
Okay.
One of those might have been carefully cultivated and processed,
Right.
so it would give a consistent and predictable experience.
Right.
But the other, it could be from a less reputable source
Oh, okay.
with varying levels of psilocybin and psilocin,
Wow.
and maybe even other compounds that weren't meant to be there at all.
Yeah, so that could lead to some pretty unexpected outcomes for the user
Absolutely.
and potentially unpleasant.
Absolutely. Especially for someone who is new to psychedelics
Yeah.
or has a pre-existing mental health condition.
For sure.
In those cases, accurate dosing isn't just a matter of preference, it's a matter of safety.
I see the bigger picture.
Yeah.
So LCMS is essential for the safety and consistency of these products.
Right.
But that's going to make things more expensive, isn't it?
It's true.
Yeah.
Advanced testing does add cost,
Yeah.
but when you weigh that against the potential risks of inaccurate labeling,
Right.
it's a small price to pay.
Yeah.
And as the market matures, I think these costs will probably come down.
Makes sense. I'm also curious about the FDA's role in all of this. Are they already thinking about regulations for psilocybin products?
Yeah, they are. They've already released draft guidance
Uh-huh.
on formal meetings between the FDA and sponsors or applicants of PDUFA products.
Yep.
While it's not specific to psilocybin,
Right.
it shows they're starting to think about how to regulate psychedelic products in general.
PDUFA, what does that stand for again?
It stands for the Prescription Drug User Fee Act.
Okay.
It basically outlines how the FDA interacts with companies developing new drugs,
Got it.
including how they get them approved.
So even though it's early days, the FDA is laying the groundwork for future regulations in the psychedelic space.
Absolutely.
That's encouraging.
And I think accurate labeling is going to be a key part of those regulations.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. But why is labeling so crucial to the regulatory process?
Well, for one, it ensures a level playing field for producers.
Okay.
If everyone is held to the same standards when it comes to labeling,
Right.
then consumers can actually make informed decisions
Okay.
about which products to choose.
That makes sense. It also protects consumers from companies making, exaggerated or misleading claims.
Exactly. And it gives the FDA a way to track products
Okay.
and monitor for any potential safety issues.
Okay.
If they notice a pattern of adverse events associated with a certain product,
Right.
they can investigate and take action if needed.
So it's not just about protecting consumers from bad products. It's also about giving the FDA the tools they need to effectively regulate this emerging market.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And it's about building trust with consumers.
Okay.
When people know that they can rely on the accuracy of labels,
Yeah.
they're more likely to feel comfortable exploring these substances.
For sure.
And potentially benefiting from their therapeutic potential.
That's a really important point. It's about creating a responsible and sustainable market for psychedelics.
Right.
One where consumers can make informed choices
Exactly.
and feel confident in the products they're using.
Exactly. And that's where accurate labeling comes in. It's a foundational element of that trust and responsibility.
So we've talked about LCMS for accurate labeling and the FDA's role in regulating this. But what about the products themselves? Are there any specific challenges when it comes to labeling different forms of psilocybin?
That's a great question, because unlike cannabis, where you've got, flower and edibles and concentrates, psilocybin can be a bit more nuanced.
Okay.
You have dried mushrooms, of course,
Right.
but then there are also extracts,
Right.
capsules,
Wow.
even microdosing products.
Okay.
Each of these presents its own challenges when it comes to verifying that alkaloid content.
So it's not just about testing one type of product.
Yeah.
It's about developing methods that work across a wide range of preparations
Exactly.
and accurately measure the active compounds.
Right, and that requires a deep understanding of the chemistry of these compounds
Uh-huh.
and how they behave in different formulations.
This sounds like a pretty tall order.
It is, but it's absolutely essential if we want to create a safe and reliable market for psilocybin products.
Yeah.
It's an area where continued research and innovation are going to be crucial.
You mentioned microdosing products. How does label accuracy play into that?
Microdosing is tricky because we're talking about really tiny amounts of psilocybin, often below the threshold for noticeable psychoactive effects.
Right.
So that means the margin for error is even smaller.
Oh, wow.
A slight variation in potency could mean the difference between a subperceptual dose and one that produces noticeable effects.
And that could be problematic, especially
Yes.
for someone who's microdosing for therapeutic purposes.
Exactly. They might not be expecting any noticeable effects at all,
Right.
and then suddenly they find themselves having an experience they weren't prepared for.
So in that case, accurate labeling isn't just about consistency. It's about safety and managing expectations.
Precisely. And it highlights the need for even more sensitive and precise testing methods.
So we're talking about a multifaceted challenge here. We need these advanced testing methods like LCMS
Yeah.
to accurately measure those psilocybin and psilocin levels across a range of product types.
Right.
We need clear regulations to make sure that all producers are held to the same standards.
Yes.
And we need to educate consumers about the importance of label accuracy and how to make informed choices.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's a complex issue,
Yeah.
but one we need to address proactively if we want to create a responsible and sustainable market for psilocybin products.
Well, this has been a really eye-opening conversation. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I think we need to take a step back
Okay.
and look at the current state of the psilocybin market.
Yeah.
Where are we now?
Right.
And what are some of the biggest challenges we're facing when it comes to label accuracy?
That's a great place to start because, understanding the current landscape is essential for navigating where we're going next.
For sure.
And I think it's fair to say that right now, the psilocybin market is a bit like the Wild West.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this Wild West scenario.
Well, unlike cannabis, which has seen a lot of progress in terms of regulation and standardization,
Right.
the psilocybin market is still largely unregulated.
Oh, wow.
That means there's a lot of variability in terms of product quality, potency, and labeling.
So it's kind of a buyer beware situation.
To a certain extent, yes. There are some reputable producers out there
Oh, yeah.
who are committed to quality and transparency,
Yeah.
but there are also those who are cutting corners.
Oh, wow.
And some might even be intentionally mislabeling products to make more money.
That's concerning.
Yeah.
What are the implications of this lack of regulation for consumers?
Well, one thing is it makes it really hard to know what you're getting.
Right.
You might buy a product that's labeled as containing a certain amount of psilocybin,
Yeah.
but the actual content could be much higher or lower.
Wow.
And as we discussed before, that can have serious consequences,
Right.
especially for people who are new to psychedelics
Yeah,
or have a pre-existing mental health condition.
exactly.
And it's not just the potency of the active compounds.
Right.
There's also the risk of contamination or adulteration.
Wow.
Without proper testing and quality control,
Yeah.
there's no guarantee that a product is free from harmful substances.
So it's not just about knowing how much psilocybin is in there. It's also about knowing what else might be lurking in there.
Precisely.
Oh,
That's why the need for accurate labeling and robust testing is so critical.
okay. I'm starting to get a better sense of the challenges.
Yeah.
But what can consumers do to protect themselves in this unregulated environment?
That's a great question, and it's one that we'll definitely delve deeper into in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay.
But for now, I'll leave you with this thought. Knowledge is power.
Okay.
The more you know about the risks and challenges associated with the psilocybin market,
Right.
the better equipped you'll be to make safe and informed choices.
That's some great advice.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely eager to hear more about how consumers can navigate this landscape. But for now, I think we need to take a quick break. We'll be back soon to continue our deep dive into the world of psilocybin labeling and explore what the future holds for this rapidly evolving market. We're back and ready to go even deeper into this wild west of psilocybin products. You said knowledge is power for consumers.
Yeah.
So let's break that down a bit. What are some key things people should know to navigate this unregulated market? Safely, of course.
Okay, well, the first thing is to be aware of the risks. It's kind of like foraging for mushrooms, out in the wild.
Right.
You have to know what to look for.
Uh-huh.
Be able to tell the safe varieties from the toxic ones.
I can identify.
In this case, it's about realizing that not all psilocybin products are created equal.
So it's not just about finding a product that says magic mushrooms on the label.
Exactly, yeah. You want to look past all the flashy marketing, dig into the details.
Okay.
Like, where are the mushrooms actually sourced from?
Right.
How are they cultivated?
Oh, yeah.
What's the processing like?
Mhm.
What kind of testing has been done to check the potency, the purity, all that?
That's a lot to consider. Sounds like transparency is pretty key.
Absolutely, yeah. Reputable producers will be upfront about their methods,
Right.
provide detailed information about their products.
Yeah.
They'll have third-party lab testing to back up their claims. If a company's being vague or evasive, that's a big red flag.
So it's like we're looking for companies that are treating psilocybin like a really high-quality herbal supplement.
That's a great way to think about it, yeah.
With that same focus on the sourcing, the processing, the testing.
Exactly. And just like you would do your research before trying a new supplement,
Right.
do your due diligence with psilocybin products.
Makes sense.
Look at reviews.
Okay.
Read up on different brands.
Uh-huh.
Don't be afraid to, ask questions.
So transparency, doing your research, all crucial. What about the actual experience, though?
Right.
How can consumers try to minimize the risks when they're actually using these products, especially with the different potencies out there?
This is where I think the wisdom of those traditional practices really comes in. Many indigenous cultures that use psilocybin, they really emphasize setting and intention.
Right.
They understand that the environment
Right.
and your mental state
Yeah.
can really influence the experience.
So it's not just about the psilocybin, it's about the context you're using it in.
Precisely, yeah. That's why creating a safe and supportive setting is so important.
Okay.
Be in a place where you're comfortable
Right.
with people that you trust.
Yeah.
Have a clear intention for what you want to get out of the experience.
Okay.
And most importantly, start low and go slow.
That's a phrase I've heard before with cannabis.
Right.
It makes sense to apply it here, too.
Absolutely.
All right.
Especially when we're dealing with an unregulated market.
Right.
Where those potencies can vary so much.
Yeah.
Start with a small dose, see how you feel.
Right.
You can always take more later.
Uh-huh.
You can't really undo a dose that was too strong to begin with.
That's a good point. It's better to err on the side of caution,
Right.
especially with something new. But what if someone does have a challenging experience? What resources are out there to help them?
Yeah, that's crucial. While psilocybin is generally considered safe, those difficult experiences can happen.
Yeah.
So it's important to have resources, support systems in place.
So it's like having a designated driver when you go out.
Yeah, I like that analogy.
You hope you won't need them, but it's good to have a safety net, just in case.
Exactly, yeah. There are organizations popping up, communities dedicated to harm reduction. Psychedelic integration.
Yeah.
They offer peer support, education, resources to help people navigate those challenging experiences.
So there's a growing awareness, even though these substances are largely unregulated.
Absolutely. And that's a really positive sign, I think. It shows that people are taking these potential risks seriously
Right.
and working to create this culture of responsible use.
It's encouraging to hear that. But let's shift gears for a second. We've talked about the current challenges.
Yeah.
What about the future? How do you see the psilocybin market evolving?
I think it's inevitable that we're going to see increased regulation.
Oh, as research continues to show the therapeutic benefits, public acceptance grows, governments will have to step in, ensure safety and quality control.
So that Wild West era, it might be coming to an end.
It's hard to say for sure,
Yeah.
but I think that's the direction things are heading.
Oh,
And
yeah.
honestly, I think it's for the best. Regulation can be tricky, but it can also provide some much-needed safeguards for consumers.
Right.
Help to really legitimize the whole industry.
It's interesting to look at how the cannabis industry has dealt with this.
Right.
They've gone through this similar period of being unregulated,
Uh-huh.
and now they're moving toward these more standardized, regulated markets.
That's a great point. I think cannabis is a good roadmap for psilocybin.
Okay.
We can learn from their successes, their challenges.
So you're suggesting that maybe we'll see a similar model for psilocybin with dispensaries and standardized testing.
It's possible, yeah.
Maybe even product labeling requirements? Yeah, I think that's a model that makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
It would allow for better control over the supply chain,
Right.
ensure product quality and safety, give consumers that clear, reliable information.
But wouldn't that make it harder for some people to get psilocybin?
Yeah.
Especially people who are using it for personal growth or spiritual exploration, not necessarily medical reasons.
That's a valid concern.
Yeah.
It's something we have to address carefully. We need to find a balance, right?
Right.
Regulation and accessibility. A possibility is to have different pathways
Okay.
for accessing psilocybin. Like there could be a medical track
Uh-huh.
for folks who need treatment for specific conditions
Okay.
and a separate track for personal use,
Got it.
maybe with stricter rules and education requirements.
So it's not about banning psilocybin. It's about creating a system where it can be used safely and responsibly,
Exactly.
whether it's for medical reasons or
Okay.
personal reasons.
Right, and that's going to take a collaborative effort,
Hey.
Researchers, policymakers, industry folks, and the community at large.
Right.
We need open and honest discussions about the risks and benefits.
Right.
Work together to create a system that works for everyone.
You mentioned the community. What role do you see them playing in shaping the future of psilocybin?
The community has a huge role to play,
Yeah.
They're the ones using these substances.
Right.
They're exploring its potential,
Yeah.
advocating for change.
Uh-huh.
They have this firsthand knowledge and experience that can really inform those policy decisions.
Right.
Help to build that culture of responsible use.
So it's not just scientists and policymakers making the rules. It's about involving the people who are most directly affected by those rules.
Exactly. That's why it's so important to have lots of different voices at the table,
Right.
People from all backgrounds, all experiences, different perspectives. Only then can we create a system that's truly equitable and inclusive.
This conversation's really shown just how complex it is to bring psilocybin into the mainstream.
Yeah.
It's not just about the science. It's not just about the regulations.
Right.
It's about people,
Right.
ethics, finding that balance between individual freedom and collective responsibility.
You've really hit the nail on the head. It's this multifaceted challenge.
Yeah.
Requires careful thought,
Right.
willingness to have open, honest conversations.
For sure.
Ultimately, it's about creating a future where these powerful substances can be used safely and ethically to benefit both individuals and society.
Okay, we've explored the challenges of this Wild West. We've kind of peeked into that potential future, more regulated market. But let's bring it back to the now. What can consumers do, like right now, to make sure they're getting safe and accurate products?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And, there's no foolproof answer in an unregulated market.
Right.
But there are definitely steps consumers can take to, at least minimize the risks.
Okay, let's hear them. I'm sure our listeners are eager for some practical advice.
All right, so first and foremost, do your research. Don't just buy the first thing you see.
Yeah.
Take some time to learn about the different brands out there,
Okay.
their practices, their testing methods, all of that.
So it goes back to that transparency idea. Look for those companies that are open and willing to share information.
Exactly, yeah. Look for those that provide detailed certificates of analysis from reputable third-party labs.
Okay.
Those certificates, they should clearly state the levels of psilocybin,
Right.
psilocin, and any other compounds that are in the product.
It's like checking the nutrition label on a food product.
Perfect analogy.
You want to know what you're putting into your body.
Absolutely. And just like you might choose organic produce or avoid certain additives, right?
Right.
You can apply the same principles to psilocybin.
Gotcha.
Look for brands that are using sustainable growing methods.
Okay.
Avoid the ones that use a bunch of unnecessary fillers or additives.
That makes sense. But what about where they're getting the mushrooms from?
The sourcing.
Yeah.
Does that matter?
Absolutely, yeah.
Huh.
The origin can have a big impact on the quality,
Okay.
the potency.
Right.
Look for brands that source their mushrooms from reputable growers,
Okay.
the ones who are doing things sustainably and ethically.
So it's about the whole supply chain, not just the final product.
Exactly. And just like, you might support fair trade coffee
Uh-huh.
or sustainably sourced seafood.
Right.
You could do the same with psilocybin.
Choose those that align with your values.
Exactly. As consumers get more discerning, it pushes the producers to up their standards.
I like that. It's about making those conscious choices to support a more ethical and sustainable industry.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've covered research, transparency, the testing, the sourcing. Any other red flags that consumers should be aware of?
One big one is the price.
Okay.
If a product seems too good to be true, it probably is.
Right.
Psilocybin is a valuable thing.
Yeah. Producing these high-quality products takes time,
Yeah.
effort, expertise.
Makes sense.
So be wary of anything that's suspiciously cheap.
Okay.
They might be cutting corners.
Right.
Or just lying about what's actually inside.
That's good advice. You often get what you pay for.
Right.
Investing in your safety, well-being.
Yeah.
Worth it.
Absolutely. And remember, this is still a mostly unregulated market.
Right.
There are risks. Approach it with caution.
Yeah.
And make sure you're informed.
These tips are incredibly helpful. But I'm wondering, with all these challenges and risks, why are people so drawn to psilocybin in the first place? What is it about these mushrooms that's capturing so much attention?
That's a great question. I think it gets to the heart of this whole psychedelic renaissance we're seeing.
Yeah.
People are drawn to psilocybin for all sorts of reasons.
No.
Some people are looking for relief from mental health conditions, like depression, anxiety. Others are looking for personal growth,
Right.
spiritual exploration, maybe even creative inspiration. And some are just, curious about altered states of consciousness, expanding their understanding of themselves, the world, all of that.
So it's not just one thing. It's a bunch of factors coming together.
Right.
But what is it about psilocybin specifically that makes it so compelling?
Well, one thing is that it's been used safely for centuries in indigenous cultures.
Right.
There's this long history of traditional use that points to its potential benefits.
Yeah.
And scientifically, psilocybin is really interesting because it interacts with certain receptors in the brain, ones that are involved with mood, perception, cognition.
Right.
That interaction can lead to some pretty big shifts in perspective, emotional breakthroughs, even mystical experiences.
So it's that mix of cultural history, scientific validation, and personal stories that's fueling the interest.
Exactly. And as more research is done, more people share their experiences, that interest is only going to grow. I think we're at a point where psychedelics are moving from the fringes into the mainstream.
That's exciting.
It is.
But with that growing interest, there's also a greater need to make sure these substances are used safely and ethically.
Absolutely.
And that brings us back to our discussion about label accuracy.
Full circle.
It's not just a technical detail. It's really a cornerstone of responsible use.
Right.
It's about letting people make their own informed choices,
Yeah.
protecting them from harm, and creating this foundation of trust for the whole psychedelic ecosystem.
Well said.
This has been a really insightful conversation.
It has.
I feel like I have a much better grasp of the challenges and opportunities ahead.
Yeah.
But before we wrap things up, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the biggest takeaways from this deep dive. What are some key things you want our listeners to walk away with?
That's a great question. I think the biggest takeaway is that knowledge is power.
Okay.
In the psychedelic world.
Yeah.
The more you know, the better you'll be able to navigate the risks. Right.
make safe choices, have positive and meaningful experiences.
So it's about doing that research, understanding the market, approaching these substances with respect and caution.
Absolutely. And also recognizing that, we're all part of this larger conversation about the role of psychedelics in society. We need to talk openly and honestly, share our experiences, and work together to create a future where these powerful tools could be used safely and ethically for everyone's benefit.
Those are powerful words, and a great note to end on.
Thank you.
But before we say goodbye, one final question. What are your hopes for the future of psilocybin?
My hope is that we can move past the fear and stigma that's been around psychedelics for so long and really embrace their potential to heal, transform, connect us to ourselves and each other. I believe psilocybin, when used responsibly and with intention, can really be a force for good. Help us break free from those limiting beliefs, expand our consciousness.
Create a more compassionate and connected world.
That's a beautiful vision. And I share that hope that we can use the power of these substances for good. But for now, it's time to wrap up our deep dive. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and insights with us today.
My pleasure. It's been great.
It's been a truly fascinating journey.
I agree.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this exploration of psilocybin labeling and responsible use.
Yes, thank you.
I hope you found it informative and empowering.
I hope so too.
Remember, knowledge is power.
It is.
And the more informed you are, the better equipped you'll be to navigate this whole landscape.
Definitely.
Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and keep exploring. A more connected and compassionate world, that's inspiring. It feels like we've covered so much.
We have.
From the specifics of testing to the bigger picture of psilocybin's potential.
The wide range.
But before we go, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier.
Okay.
The impact of this Wild West market on research.
Right. It's crucial and often gets overlooked. If the products researchers are using have different compositions, it makes it really hard to get clear results.
Makes sense.
How can we say for sure whether psilocybin is effective and safe for a specific condition if what they're starting with is all over the place?
It's like trying to follow a recipe that says some flour and a bit of sugar.
Exactly. You might get a cake, but who knows what it'll be like.
Right. Inconsistent every time.
And in research, that means unreliable data. Which slows everything down. New therapies get delayed.
So it's not just about people being safe using these products on their own.
Right.
It affects the whole scientific process.
Exactly. And that's why having standards is so important. From how it's grown and processed to testing and labeling. Every single step has to be controlled. So we know exactly what we're working with.
That seems tough with how things are now. Are there any signs that things are moving in the right direction?
There are. The FDA getting involved is encouraging. Their draft guidance shows they're moving towards regulation. And within the industry itself. More and more people are realizing they need quality control, standardization.
So it's like the industry is kind of regulating itself a bit, getting ready for stricter rules in the future.
That's a good way to put it, A lot of producers are already doing rigorous testing, adopting best practices for how they grow and process everything. They get it. Building trust and being credible is important if they want to be around for the long haul.
It's good that they're thinking ahead. But even with rules and standards, won't there always be people trying to cut corners?
There probably will be some, But with good testing methods, oversight, and educating people, we can reduce the risks, make the market safer and more trustworthy.
So it's going to take a lot of different groups working together.
It will.
Regulators, the industry, researchers, the community.
Everyone has a part to play. The goal is to make sure these substances are used safely and ethically.
This deep dive has been amazing. We've talked about the problems, the potential, how complicated it all is to bring psilocybin into the mainstream.
It is complex.
I understand so much more now about why accurate labeling matters.
Good.
And all the things that go into using these products responsibly.
It's been great discussing this with you. I hope our conversation helps people be more aware and curious.
And to our listeners, keep being curious, stay informed, ask questions. This world is changing fast.
Always something new.
There's always more to learn.
Remember, accurate labeling is important, but it's just one part of this. It's about being transparent, responsible, and truly respecting these incredible compounds.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, that wraps up another deep dive. We'll be back soon with more from the world of science and beyond.
Looking forward to it.
Until then, keep exploring.